into the room, and the recording is beginning. Good afternoon to those of you that are joining us now. Thank you for making time on this Wednesday, late in February. I realize many of you probably have very busy schedules, and just want to say thank you to making time for us here at Villanova. My name is Megan Pesco, and I am the director here in the graduate tax program. We're going to kick things off in just a few minutes while folks join in. And while we wait, I'm just going to go over some housekeeping items. You will be automatically on mute for the duration of the webinar, so that we have a smooth sound system going throughout the duration of the hour. We will make sure that the webinar does end promptly by 3 o'clock, and 3 o'clock Eastern time, I should say. And if you have any questions that come up at all while we're going over some slides or while panelists are answering questions, please feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen or the chat box. My colleague, Tim Dinan, who is joining us as the Assistant Director of Admissions, will be monitoring both of those, and will send any questions along for the panelists to answer, or if you just have some one-off questions that you'd like to know about, he can answer them there as well. And a recording of this session will go out to all registrants likely later this week, along with a fee waiver code for our application as a thank you for joining. So we'll get started in just about a minute and kick things off around 2:05. Okay, so I am going to kick things off by introducing our faculty director and professor of law, Professor Joy Moline. Professor Moline has been here at the Villanova University Charles Woodger School of Law since 2006 and teaches in both our JD program as well as the graduate tax program. She teaches at the Tax 1 and Wealth Tax classes in the program, and along with Professor Les Book, was the creator of our courses for the online program, which we launched in 2014. So Professor Moline, I will kick it off to you. And thank you again, everyone, for joining.
Yes, welcome, and thank you for joining us today. I'm going to briefly go over our program. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because I know that everybody wants to hear from the panelists. For those who want to hear more from sort of my perspective regarding the program, how it functions, how it operates, sort of like a deep dive into the classes and the pedagogy, we often offer separate webinars that focus exclusively on that. Today's webinar is focused more on our alums and sort of their experience as they move through the program, and what tips, advice, or other nuggets of wisdom and perspective that they can offer to you. So to begin, our program offers 2 degrees and 3 certificates. So for those seeking a degree, there are 2 pathways. You can earn an MT or an LLM. Now, one of the things that I think is really important and special about our program is that regardless of what pathway you're in or what certificate you're in, everybody who's enrolled in a course is taking the same course that everybody sort of learns together. So the Masters of Taxation is really just for those who have who don't have a law degree, who have an undergraduate bachelor's degree in accounting or a field related to taxation. And the LLM is for those who have graduated from a law school. But again, our lawyers and our non-lawyers learn side by side in the same classrooms. And I like to say they learn like with, but also from each other, because they bring a slightly different perspective and background into the classroom. And within the program, there's various levels of experience. People have incredibly diverse backgrounds. And I think that that can really help enrich the learning experience and the class discussion. So for the MT degree, it is 30 credit hours and it consists of 12 courses. There are like 6 required courses, a number of electives that are available, and all MT students take an additional class called Tax Research and Legal Reasoning. And someone who wants to sort of maximize or really accelerate and move through the program as fast as possible can earn their degree in as few as 2 years. Typically, it's, somewhere between, more like the average around 3 years. Some people do it in 2, some people do it a little longer, but you can do it in as few as 2. The LLM is 24 credit hours and it consists of 9 courses, the same 6 required courses as the MT degree. So those core requirements are the same. The main difference between the 2 degrees is that MT students take more electives to earn the degree. And this is determined by our Department of Education. And so that was the reasoning behind that. Certificates, we have 3 key areas that we focus on: employee benefits, estate planning, and state and local tax. And those can be completed in 5 courses. So they can certainly be done in a year, less than a year, depending on how you structure your time in the program. So, and outside of employee benefits, estate planning, and SALT, we have a wide variety of electives. And so there's certainly a lot of options and pathways that somebody would be able to follow. And as I am speaking, and before I move into the next slide, I see that someone has asked about international taxation. And I would say that that is an area that I have actively been working on expanding. So we are now offering International Tax 1, International Tax 2, and I have a few other international tax classes that are in the early stages of being developed, as I would love to see us sort of build out into eventually offering an international tax certificate as well. So we are expanding our options and opportunities in that area. And we have some really good relations with, in particular, some large national firms who specialize in international tax. Now, with regard to our approach to learning throughout the program, as Megan mentioned, that me and one of my colleagues, Professor Book, we helped develop the pedagogy behind the program. And really our thinking was that people learn best when they're actively engaged in the learning. And so the classes move on an 8-week format, where basically week 1 through 7 is the substantive classes, and in week 8 is the final exam. We use the 8-week module format because back in the day when the program ran on traditional sort of 13 to 16 week semester basis, most students wanted to take 2 classes per semester. As we were adding the online program, and we've now converted our campus program to this format as well, we realized that working professionals really wanted to be able to both sort of start and stop at different times throughout a year and really focus on their classes. So the 8-week class format allows us to run classes sort of year round on this we call it the carousel, because it's sort of a never-ending carousel with 6 terms. And so it allows for multiple start dates, and it allows for someone to sort of take a break during a busy season, or if they want to take a vacation, without necessarily having to sit out an entire semester. So maybe they can still take 1 term in 1 class and then sit out for the other term. And while they're moving through, they're focused on 1 class at a time. And so with that, we are trying to really actively engage with the students in the learning process. And we do this by having a variety of what we refer to as no and low stakes formative and summative assessments. So no stakes meaning that there's no grade attached to it, and low stakes meaning that there is a grade, but not doing well on one particular task is not going to put you in major jeopardy. And so it's usually the formative assessments that have that are no stakes, that throughout the week you have an opportunity to engage with a bunch of questions where you submit answers and you get immediate feedback from the instructor in the form of sort of preloaded written answers or narrated PowerPoint slides, sometimes Excel spreadsheets, and it allows you to look at your answer, compare it to the instructor's answer, and do sort of your own sort of self-reflection. Did I understand? Do I have questions? Do I need to follow up and ask something on discussion board? Do I need to follow up with the instructor? And that this is really all sort of formative in terms of helping the student to sort of learn as they move through the material. At the end of every week for the first 6 weeks, there is a weekly quiz that goes over the material for the week. That is more of a summative assessment. Most professors drop one, if not two. Two is pretty common. Quizzes, and they only count like your 4 highest grades, as part of your final grade. And then there's a final exam in the 8th week. So there's a lot of opportunities to sort of, again, engage with the material, submit your answers, really sort of test yourself regarding how well you've understood the material and get feedback. Now, after you've engaged with the formative assessments and prior to the weekly quiz, there is a live class session where you can engage with the instructor. Every class is sort of a little bit different and run a little bit differently, but it is live. Some focus a little bit more on lecture. Everybody, is open to questions. I like to pose a lot of like hypotheticals, really sort of start the class with sort of a review of the material for the week where everybody is on common footing, common ground, and then sort of dive into some of the areas where I know there's some, some tricky issues, or where I have received questions during the week, and sort of really focus on that and making sure that everybody has a solid grounding in the material before they move on to the weekly quiz. So it's meant to be, as very interactive with the material, and then as interactive and engaging as you want with the professor and with your colleagues who are in the class with you. And we feel like that is a really good way to learn, to have that sort of active involvement. But having said all that, I'm going to move to our panelists who can talk more about what they thought about this approach and their experiences, both in the live sessions or experiences sort of, learning outside of those live sessions on their own and engaging with the materials. And so I'm very excited to have 3 terrific panelists with us today who are going to each introduce themselves. And I guess we'll start with Thomas Boyle, who is a Villanova JD LLM, and then move through according to the slide.
Sure, thanks, Professor Mullane. So my name is Tom Boyle. I received my JD and LLM from Villanova. Some little background about myself. I'm originally from the Wilkes-Barre-Scranton area, and currently I work for Grant Thornton in Philadelphia in their SALT department doing state and local taxation. Anything else, Professor, I should add?
I think that's great background. I had Tom as a JD student, but even before joining the program, and it's so great to have you back.
Nice to be back. Thank you.
All right, and I think next we'll move to George.
Thank you, Professor Mullane. My name is George Navarro. I'm a sole practitioner in North Carolina with 20 years of being on my own. I work with small business owners and individuals in both the compliance, tax resolution work, and tax planning.
Great, thank you. Thank you for being here.
Good afternoon. I'm Robin Whitlock, and I'm a recent graduate of Villanova in the Master's in Taxation program. I'm located in the Lake Norman area of North Carolina, although I have clients all over. I'm a financial advisor, but I've also done tax work over the last 20 years, and I thought it would be really important to try to focus specifically on the estate planning piece of the course.
All right, thank you. Thank you everyone for being with us. And now the director of the program, Megan Pesco, is going to be the moderator to sort of kick off the discussion.
Great, thank you so much, Professor Mullane. So I am going to start with a question for you, Tom. You know, you, as you shared, finished your law degree here at Villanova, and then started working at Grant Thornton, and then came back to earn your LLM. I recall you managing that transition very well. Could you talk about, you know, the strategies you used or any recommendations you have in striking the right balance in, you know, starting a new career, but then going back to school to finish that degree?
Sure, thanks, Megan. So my first thing, probably the biggest thing, was more communication wise, to take the time to kind of more adjust, because like Megan mentioned, I went straight from my JD, started working, and then came back in a few months later to finish my LLM. So for me, it was, first of all, just getting more settled into the job and the hours and the expectation, because kind of mentioned with the format, I wanted to be able to plan my schedule around times of the year I wasn't too busy. So if certain years where I have busy season, I have deadlines and large engagements. So I kind of spent a few months getting accustomed to the work I did, the hours, what kind of engagements I would be on for the year, and then kind of more talk to my supervisors to kind of more get approval from their side as well, and you know what they thought was helpful for me to take. And for me, I was in Grant Thornton was very receptive and excited to help me get back to finish my LLM. And then once you were actually in the class, it was more about communicating with your professors. So fortunately for me, my schedule and my class load worked out quite well, that it would never had too much of an issue balancing anything or missing an assignment or missing anything like that. But I definitely know from being in those classes that the teachers did work with students who missed. So because of the pandemic and for a few reasons, I ended up taking quite a bit of my classes through the online portal or online system, I should say. So they recorded the classes, so students who were in quote unquote busy season or weren't able to make it for a session or had a client engagement were able to kind of follow up, get the lesson the next day, and then kind of continue on with our weekly quizzes without much of an issue. So really the main issue for me was just more that communication, you know, first with your job, figuring out where everything is, you know, how you would balance everything, and the second aspect with your professors. And everyone I worked with from the professor wise was very understanding and helpful to help you kind of manage your workload.
Great, thank you for your insight, Tom. George, I have a similar question for you. You know, as a solo practitioner, you know, you were in the program all while managing your firm, your own firm, while also taking classes. I don't think you skipped a beat, and you managed your classwork extremely well. Could you talk to how you approach managing your classwork along with your client and professional commitments?
Thank you, Megan. Well, for me, first of all, it's been 30 years since I've been in school. And so the first fear, the concern was, what do I do? And basically the programs have a weekly schedule, what you need to read, the homework you need to provide, by when, and then you have the class on Wednesdays or Thursdays, and then you have the exams the week. So I figured I just followed the program. I did the work. Sometimes I had to push it and wait till the weekend, but I did the work, and that helped a lot, just creating, forcing myself to follow the program and do the work. And it took a lot of hours. It wasn't like 5 hours. It was more than that. But by maintaining that, it gave me a real comfort that, okay, these are the hours that I'm going to study or make it up, and just did it. And as we said, we had the classes were recorded. So if you missed it, you can go back. Even if you didn't miss it, I would go back and listen to it again and take notes and stop and start. And it helped a lot. And ask a lot of questions. I asked a lot of questions, and I think going back to school, I went with the attitude that, hey, there's no stupid question at this stage. Where if I'm going to ask dumb questions that I feel may not be practical, applicable in the professional field, I can ask it here to the professor and to the students and get an answer. And it really helped a lot for me to just question, collaborate, and that's how I worked it through each week. Just looked at it each week in each semester.
That's great to hear. And I just thought I would jump in to say, and Megan knows this as well, that we obviously work closely with the IT department at Villanova, and we frequently hear that for sort of many other programs that have recordings, students drop off pretty quickly, they don't finish, and they never sort of return. But our program really stands out to them because they notice all of our students, in terms of all the sort of audiovisual aids that are available in recordings, they watch them, and sometimes they're surprised they rewatch them several times. And I point that out because I just think it's a great resource sometimes, and you just feel like you need that repetition, or did I really get this, or want to go back to something. But that's something our IT department has mentioned, the university has mentioned, is very unique about our program, is how much those videos are utilized. But I'm also really gratified to hear that you felt really comfortable asking questions, which is what, as a professor, what we're here for. What we want is to engage and share our knowledge. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, George, for sharing that. And it's you both, Tom and George, have talked about the recordings, and Professor Molina, I always highlight this. So the grad tax program has been recording classes since before Zoom or multimedia classrooms was a thing. They used to give out tape recorders, like an old reporter's recorder with them, and students would have to buy the mini cassette tapes and would just like have that sit out in class and record the professor's lecture and class discussion. So when Professor Molina and Professor Book implemented the pedagogy, that was obviously a hallmark of making sure that our online classes still retain that ability. And I think it just pairs so well with our live instruction. And then, like you said, George, being able to go back on the weekends preparing for a final and re-listening. Even if you were in class, you still have that tool, or if you missed it, you can catch it in a real-time video capture. So thank you for highlighting that program aspect. Robin, I am going to pass it over to you. I wanted to ask, a similar question. What were your strategies? I know you're very busy at your firm in wealth management, also have client and professional commitments. What recommendations would you have and that you used in approaching classwork along with your, personal and professional commitments?
Well, I think, like George and Tom, one of the most important things that I found very useful at the very beginning were the fact that the syllabus for the 8-week courses, everything is laid out perfectly. So you can look at the syllabus for the entire week, for the entire 8 weeks, and know exactly what needs to be done during those periods. And I live by my calendar. I have a very full calendar, and if it's on the calendar, it's going to happen. So I would take those, all the syllabi, and match them up with my calendar, and then just put those assignments and tasks in there so that I knew at the end of the day, this is what I need to do. And I think George said this, I waited till the weekends to get a lot of the work done. But yes, it's a full commitment, but having those schedules broken down like that. And I did the 8-week courses. So I finished my degree in 2 years. And I don't think that I could have done that if I didn't have those breakdowns every 8 weeks. And for me, it was a good checklist, because you could look at the 8-week calendar and say, okay, I've just finished week 1. Now I've got week 2. These are the expectations for the week, and moving forward. So I found that very, very helpful just for time management. So that was kudos to you all for preparing this program and giving us those tools so that we could plan our calendars.
Great, thank you. Thank you for sharing. We'll make sure we pass that on to our instructors as well, as how critical keeping it in that 8 weeks and making sure that everything's available up front is for the success of our students. So thank you very much for your feedback. Pivoting back to you, Tom, as you mentioned, you started your career as a tax attorney in state and local tax. I don't recall if you took SALT classes here at Villanova, but could you talk about how your tax classes, your LLM program, helped you prepare for your start as a tax practitioner?
Sure, thanks, Megan. So first, a little more background about myself is I came from no tax or really accounting background, going into an accounting firm doing quote unquote like tax law consulting. So really, it was all fairly new to me. I wasn't that interested in tax going to law school. Kudos to Professor Mullane. That's who I took originally. And I was like, oh, I actually really like this subject. And okay, I could do a couple more on this. So I took I think both classes she offers in the grad tax program. And I was like, okay, no, I really like this. I wanted to do more in tax, applied to accounting firms and got accepted, and then kind of got placed more randomly in their SALT department without much exposure other than a couple of the LLM classes. And that was part of why I wanted to take the LLM is, like, hey, I'm more limited. I'd love to get more. So my employer was like, oh yeah, go for it. So I definitely took SALT classes through the LLM program to get additional exposure. But additionally, even outside the area I focus in right now, which is SALT, it was helpful to get an understanding of some international, some federal, just because to comment on things, and especially in tax, so much is interrelated. So it was to kind of get a big, broad understanding and be able to focus and comment and just get an idea how things flow together was really helpful to me in my career so far already. And it's only been now, I think it's been a year since I graduated, and I could already tell, the different areas has been helpful for me to comment and have a discussion with, and help clients and who have very limited SALT or tax background understand some of these complex topics.
That's great feedback. Thank you for sharing, Tom. We'll make sure we pass it along to our SALT instructors, although I know you know some of them at Grant Thornton. And a similar question, George, I was going to ask you, having you just finished your coursework this past December along with Robin, what was the most meaningful course that you took in the Master of Taxation program? And if you have any tips for choosing courses at different times for students, future students?
Well, for me, I not only did I get my master's degree, I also got my certificate in the state and local taxation as well. And I think that started all with Professor Dick Harvey. He was my survey of tax very first class. And really having him as the first, in the first course, and giving me, I was exempted from taking some of the other basic courses because he felt that I had enough knowledge, and that helped me to gain the time to do the other courses. To get the certificate. And so that first course for me, even though all the other courses, as Tom was saying, I took international taxation, took all the state and local taxes, employee benefit courses. That first course for me was the grounding is I felt the confidence that I can do this program, being able to complete it. And at the same time, complete the tax research course at the same time. Going through that one, that was a little tough in the beginning, but those two courses and Professor Dick Harvey Confidence helped me a lot in really just getting my feet wet and really running with the program for the rest of the 2 years to complete it.
Thank you. That's good to hear. We always hear good things about Professor Harvey, and he does put such care and attention into his course. So I'm glad to hear that you had a good experience with it.
I'm just going to jump in really quick to say, for those who aren't familiar, one of the great things about the survey of tax class that we talk about more in some of the more pedagogy focused webinars is that, you know, it's usually the first class that students take in the graduate tax program, and it's a high level overview of all the areas of tax. So that's that grounding that George was talking about. So in a short period of time, you get a little bit of a taste of sort of state and local, estate planning, international, the business taxes, and because each one of those areas, there are so many follow-up courses. It's not, there's no deep dive, but it does give you that grounding and that high-level overview and some of that big picture that Tom was talking about. I think it can be great for seeing the interconnectedness and the ways in which the tax systems are interrelated. And so it's a great jumping off point. And it's a terrific class. I'm glad you found that so beneficial.
And Robin, I know that you had mentioned, you work in estate planning, you were specifically looking for courses, related to that. And we've actually seen an increase over the past recent, I would say, starting before the pandemic, I guess so 4 or 5 years. Professor Mullane and I have seen an increase in the number of financial advisors, financial planners, wealth management advisors like yourself, starting to come through the program and seek the Master of Taxation and our estate planning certificate to broaden their expertise. And so I wanted to ask you, how did the classes measure up to what you were looking for when you were first considering, going back for your MT?
Excuse me, I'm losing my voice. The estate planning courses were phenomenal because over the last 2 or 3 years, I had the opportunities to work with high net worth clients doing some estate planning. And I felt like if I could get some more basics in some of the different planning techniques, that would make me more valuable to some of these families. So when I did research out just looking for a program, that's when Villanova popped up specifically with the tax program and the opportunity to focus in the estate planning arena. And as I moved through those classes, it was wonderful because the classes seemed to coincide with some of the work that I was doing with the families. I'm thinking about the wealth tax class, the charitable gift planning class with Professor Worley. All those seemed to, as I was moving through those classes, there were things that I was learning in those classes that I was able to implement in my day-to-day. So it made me more valuable for those families.
You're used to seeing videos of Professor Mullane then, if you was taking wealth tax, I guess.
Pardon?
I said you're used to seeing videos of Professor Mullane for the wealth tax class.
Yes, and the videos are great. That was one of the things, one of the professors that I reached out to, I think Professor Worley used a lot of the videos with Professor James, I believe at Texas Tech University.
Yeah, Russell James,
Those
that's right.
Yes, those were great. Those videos are very helpful. So I'm another check mark for Villanova with all of the video learning, because I'm a visual learner and those really helped me through. But to circle back to your point, it made me more valuable because I had some real world experience, but I also could back it up with what I was learning in the classroom.
Right. And along those same lines, George, when you were looking for a program as a CPA, I was wondering if you could share, what attributes you were looking for in an MT that, prospective students may also be looking for. Oh, am I on? Oh, George, I'm sorry, that was to you. Yeah, as a CPA, what are you looking for? What were you looking for in a master's program?
When I decided to start the program, there were 2 things that I found important for me. after many years of not going to school, just learning on my own, basically, I was my own teacher and I was my own student with the law and my research work. And I wanted to learn what I didn't know. You don't know what you don't know. That was one thing. And learning from others, their point of view, and being able to be current in the law, being able to, you can do 10 years, 20 years, but you don't know whether you're learning or you're basically, you just don't know how well you are progressing because there's no measurement. So for me, it was learning what I don't know, so many areas that I'm involved in, and that helped me to raise questions that I wouldn't have brought before because there was topics that I didn't know. And also, it's such a competitive environment nowadays. And if I'm gonna be working another 10 years or 20 years, I want to feel that I am capable and I can compete, and that I know what I'm talking about to a degree. There's still a lot of learning to do. I'm still a student in many ways, but those are the two basic things that I found important, why I chose it. And I chose Villanova because one of the things that struck me a lot is its values. Even though you're online learning, they expect you, there's a certain character, there's a certain values that trust to do the right thing, to, you're going to do the work, you're going to earn it, and so I felt that was important for me, those values that Villanova wanted in the student, and I wanted to do that. I wanted to have that. I wanted to grow with that.
Thank you for sharing that. I think that is such a critical part of what we are hoping that students feel. And Professor Millian, I didn't know if you were going to add to that at all.
Just that I'm glad that was your experience and your takeaway, that our program is very much not about just handing out degrees for the sake of handing out degrees, but really what we want, I think everybody involved, from the grad tax office to everyone who's on that, sort of our adjunct faculty and full-time faculty. Always say, like, they're here and doing this for a reason, that they feel like it is in some way a calling to share what they know from their, from their knowledge, from their practice, from their experience, and that, that they very much want everyone who's in the program to leave feeling like they have been enriched, like they have really grown, and that they're going to be able to take what they've learned in their program and apply it to their practices. That's something that's, very important to everybody who's involved in the program.
Absolutely. And so thank you for sharing that, George, because it's nice to hear. Again, that's what we're hoping for, but without, having time with our students and alums, we want to make sure that that's actually what's happening.
Yes.
So Tom, a final question for you. As you took both, as you shared, took campus classes at times and online classes, you're local to where Villanova is, but like, as you mentioned, we moved many of our classes fully online in the pandemic. That was the preference of our students, and Professor Millian and I, listened to the students, and that's what worked for them. That's what we were going to be doing. So I was wondering if you could share about your experience in attending classes in both types of formats.
Sure. So I was a little worried originally taking fully online. So doing law school in person, I originally signed up to take at least my first couple of LLM classes in person, but that was the first class. I think it was scheduled for March when the pandemic hit. So we switched gears, but I was impressed with the quality and the quantity of the online learning materials, especially in the remote environment, which I know we mentioned a few times, but the ability to have a class session, have some possibly videos prior to kind of do a deeper dive on the readings, and then be able to ask more informed questions, and then having, follow-up questions or maybe our quizzes, and then any possible videos kind of walking you through, because the thing I enjoyed is more the practical like application. So not just repetition of, okay, did you do the reading, but can you comprehend the reading and apply it to a more real life scenario, which I really enjoy, because that's the part that actually matters in practice is, application of it. So I was really pleasantly surprised with the quality, and be able to kind of repeat those questions and then kind of go back to the professors. And then so I know particularly I had a corporate tax class, which was very involved. It was very complex, and be able to kind of sit through, take your time with videos was very helpful for me. And I think very uh, even with the amount of learning I did in person for the JD classes. So I was very surprised, but really enjoyed it and took a lot out of it. Megan, are you still there?
Oh, yeah, I'm here. Yeah, I'm
There you
sorry.
are.
No, yeah, here I am. Sorry. I think I froze for a minute or so.
Yeah, and I did want to comment on that as well. Yes, this experience online, I've taken other online courses over the years, and this was more engaging, a more structured environment, but there was still the ability to be flexible. So I agree with Tom's assessment. The online environment was very productive, in my opinion.
I will say again, that's very sort of rewarding feedback for us to hear. Also, in the spirit of like giving sort of tips and advice, will pick up on something that you said, Tom, and throw out my piece of advice that I tell frequently and widely, which is that when it comes to corporate tax and partnership tax, those are, I think, the two hardest courses in the program. They are required courses. And so I tell everyone that you need to time when you take them wisely, to sort of match up with a time in your life where like everything else is on sort of a slower burn. You definitely don't want to be in your busy season or have sort of a busy personal life at the same time that you're taking either partnership tax or corporate tax, just because of the nature of the material. It's really challenging, and it takes a different kind of focus. And so it's always good to sort of pair that up with the slower, if there is such a thing, the slower times in your life.
No, and I can attest to actually doing a mix of compliance and consulting for both partnerships and C Corps, that it were helpful, and they are complex no matter what you do, but the classes at least prepared you with the correct language or vocabulary and where to look and how to understand, and how to dig for more information or examples to comprehend and then actually advise correctly.
Another great piece of feedback, because one of the things that we like to emphasize is that our program, I guess you should say, this is really not just about the pure acquisition of knowledge. I mean, obviously you need knowledge, but the tax law, as we know, is going to change. And so along with having the knowledge of what is the tax law today, is having the skills and the abilities to sort of grow and adapt. And as you said, sort of do the research, do the thinking, figuring out what you need to do when the tax law changes, so that you can continue to grow and continue to sort of learn, because you've got the skills that you've developed in the program, and at least sort of know where to go and know how to do it.
Thank you both. Thank you, Rob and Tom and Professor Mullane for talking about that. That is something we always do go over, is do not take corporate tax or partnership tax in busy season. I'm not a tax professional. My passion is higher education and helping students and alum like these get through their educational journeys. But even I know that not to take partnership tax during busy season. I have another question for you, Robin. And if there's any questions on that folks haven't asked yet, please send them through. So before we close out and move on to the final slides in our webinar, not related to your time in the program, I wanted to ask you, Robin, clearly you're, meeting and greeting new clients. You talked about wanting to do more work with high net worth families. I know in all of our industries that you're all in, professional development and networking are critical to growing your practice. Could you just share any strategies you go to for prospective students listening on right now?
As far as, well, I will tell you something that I did during my time at Villanova with the classes. Every professor is a professional in their field, and I found it very helpful to connect with the professors on their social media pages. LinkedIn is one, because there's also tips and other things that they provide. And I reference back to Professor Worley, connecting me with Professor James, because he has other materials out there that I found very helpful in my practice. So one of the things that I tried to do as I moved through each course, I would try to connect with each professor in their LinkedIn profiles, just so that I could follow those. I know there's another tax notes or tax talk. It's a podcast that one of the professors was involved in. So I found that very helpful. So trying to make those connections outside of just the classroom connection, although there's very talented my peers in my classes, but also I found it very helpful to connect with the professors, because not only are they were professors, they're also professionals in their field. So I found that very helpful in developing those relationships.
That's great to hear. And it's so good to hear that the faculty have been able to connect with you. I know that through the time before I joined the program and now in working with Professor Mullane, we are meticulous in bringing adjunct instructors on board. They have to be experts in their field. They have to have a strong commitment to teaching and wanting to, assist students in their, and just their advisory. And so I know that our instructors, just like Professor Worley, want to do the same, help students along their way, make any connections they can. And I think that's a benefit of having so many top level expert practitioners as adjuncts in the program, because they can offer both that real world advice, but also the solid tax theory and pedagogy in the classroom.
And I do think that's very important, that the real world, especially for us in this program, yes, you can sit and read a book all day, but having those professors who have been out in the real world and can bring those experiences back, that's what I found very, that was very important to me. And I can't remember all my professors' names, but every professor was very professional and an expert in their field. And I really enjoyed the program.
I'm going to just jump in here to say about that, not remembering all their names. Something I was reflecting on recently is that, just for future reference, in the estate planning area, if you just say Chris, that covers like 75% of the faculty.
So true.
Professor Worley is Chris Worley, Professor Chris Harvey, Professor Chris Siegel.
Yeah, oh, yes.
Yes, I have mentioned to Megan that any more hires in this area need to be named something not Chris, not anything but Chris.
Anything but Chris, yeah. And they all go by Chris, not Christopher, but they're all Chris. So yeah, it gets, we have to do a lot of Chris S, Chris W in the program. Thank you again for sharing. And that's, again, just great to hear that you've had that relationship building with our faculty. I am going to reshare my slides now to wrap up our program, since we're about 2:50, and then I will pass it back to Professor Mullane to close us out. So let me do that. Sorry, it's just taking a minute or two. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go over these just at a very high level, since the information on these next two slides will be sent to you through the webinar recording. But just wanted to highlight our admission process. We recognize that as busy tax professionals, busy financial professionals and attorneys, Your time is very valuable. And so we have streamlined our admission process to make it as easy as possible for you to submit an application to the program. We have an electronic online application. We require just one letter of recommendation, which can be professional or academic. We require an essay. I think this is one of the critical pieces of an application, as it's our chance to get to know you, what your values are, what your professional goals are, and how we can align with them. An updated resume, and then transcripts from any institution where you've earned 6 or more credits. If you are seeking a Master of Taxation degree, which would be for accounting or business professionals, we again want your baccalaureate transcripts. If you have a licensure, such as a certified public accountant certificate or CFP, an enrolled agent exam, we would like to see, proof of those credentials, and that waives you out of taking a standardized test. We also have waivers for standardized tests if you have significant work experience in the tax industry, and at least a 3.0 GPA in your undergraduate work. If you're an attorney applying for the LLM degree, we're looking for a JD from a law school approved by the ABA. And our admissions timeframe, we are still within our summer cycle right now. The deadline for summer is not until April 1st. My colleague, Tim Dinan, who's on here and will be sending you the recording, can go over the materials with you that are needed and any questions you may have about applying. Our deadline for the fall semester is not until July 31st. We do have scholarships available that I wanted to mention on this recording and on the webinar. There is a separate process to apply for scholarships that Tim can provide to you directly. We make sure that we have a rolling admissions decision process. And so the committee who reviews your application will render decisions within 7 to 10 business days upon when you submit your completed application. And for your calendar planning, if you're looking to join us this summer, the first week of school begins May 9th. And if you're looking instead for fall, the first week is August 29th. Our classes are 8 weeks, as Professor Mullane mentioned, so we do have start dates 3 times a year in the spring, summer, and fall. And here's where you can reach us. This is our direct lines and emails. Myself, Professor Mullane, and as I mentioned, our Assistant Director, Tim Dinan. If you have any questions, both Tim and I have Microsoft booking appointments available, and would be happy to meet with you to answer any questions that you may have. So in closing, I'm going to pass it back to Professor Mullane, and just want to thank you all again for taking time out of your day to join us for this webinar.
Yes, thank you for joining us. Please do reach out if you have any questions. We're more than happy to do everything we can to answer your questions. Also very much again want to thank our panelists, Tom, George, Robin, for providing great insights into our program from your perspective. And that's sort of no doubt very helpful, along with sort of your tips and your advice of managing your sort of busy lives outside of going back to school. So thank you so much for your time and being here today. And I guess with that, I will say that at least where we are, we have some beautiful weather today and a little bit more time to hopefully enjoy the day before the cold front comes in, which is on its way. Hopefully wherever you are, you still have some time to enjoy the rest of your day. And again, just reach out at any point in time if you have any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Take care and have a good day.
Thank you.